Can you use a router to carve on a round surface? Let's find out. So I've got 3 different walking sticks. They're all kind of different diameters, different lengths. These belong to my father, and what I want to do today is I want to show you how I approach carving different rounded items. So over the years, I've had a lot of instances where people bring me things that had a round surface and want to know if I can carve a name in it. I've done baseball bats, boat oars, pool sticks. Today we're going to do a walking stick. So the most critical part of this whole operation is clamping this thing in place. You have to make sure that you've got plenty of clamp surface around where you want to carve, but it can't be right where you carve because you can't have the base plate in the way. So let me show you how I solved that problem.
The first thing we did was tape off where we want to lay out. Now, what we probably should have done is clamp this thing into place first and then taped it off, because one little hit on this stick and it would have knocked our layout letters all over the place. But luckily this time it worked out. We used our 3/4 inch Bookman font and we just set it on the flattest surface that we could find. We also taped off a little more than we needed to because we didn't want to get overspray on the stick, especially inside the little knot holes. That would have been really difficult to get out. When you're spraying something like this, you really want to be careful. You want to spray it as vertical as you possibly can. That way you're not getting spray underneath the letters. Dad basically took a couple pieces of 2x4 and he notched them out, and he used those little toggle spring clamps to hold the stick in place on the bottom. These things actually work really well. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can get some of these if you need some. For the top part of the jig, he wanted to make sure it had plenty of stability, but he didn't want it to be so close to the carving that as he's carving, he's going to hit it with his base plate. Then he just used a few quick clamps and clamped this thing down solid. Dad's using the profile bit for all of his carving, but this isn't brand new. This one's been sharpened several times, so you don't have to go quite as deep to get such a fat line, which is perfect for this application. Notice that Dad's hands are resting on the stick, and he's just following the shape of the stick as he goes. If you try to stay straight doing this whole thing, then your depth is going to be way off and you're really going to be able to see it once it's done. You'll notice that as Dad's pulling the router towards him, he's got to crouch down just a touch to try to see the router bit. This is really a pretty difficult task, guys, but it's definitely doable. You just want to make sure that you have a good look at the bit and the carving that you're getting in there. One thing to remember is when there's something that's difficult to carve, the deeper your router bit is, the harder it is to hold a line. So it's always a good idea to start off shallow. You can always come back and drop your router bit and make it deeper as you go. But to get that initial line, try to start out shallow, which is exactly what Dad did here. I'll make sure to leave a link in the description for all the stuff we used today, from the router base plate to the layout letters, the bits, and everything. Once Dad got his initial carving done, then he took all the tape off, which took a little bit of time because this stick has a coating on it. This tape stuck really well. Now that Dad's got his initial line, he dropped his router bit to somewhere around 3/16 of an inch deep. Now, he's going back to make the carving wider and deeper, but also to clean up some of his lines. You could see on the V it was a little bit shaky, but that's kind of understandable considering how difficult this is. We're not sure what kind of wood this stick is, but it was definitely a softwood. The wood itself was actually pretty easy to carve, but the inconsistency of the stick and the fact that it's round is what really made it a challenge. Once all the carving is done, then you got to use that stiff bristle brush to get down in those grooves and get all the sawdust out. Next, we're going to tape around the carving itself, and we're going to tape quite a bit around it because this is where we're going to spray it with the black primer. You really want to avoid getting overspray. It's easy to get off, but if you get it in those holes, again guys, that's going to be a challenge. Once the spray was dry, we used lacquer thinner and a paper towel to take all of this black off. Now, you want to make sure before you do something like this that you do a little test piece somewhere where you're not really going to see it, because we weren't sure if this lacquer thinner was going to damage the coating on the stick, but luckily it didn't.
So guys, there it is. This one was really tricky. Of the three, this was by far the most difficult, and I knew it would be just because it's really a weird shape. It doesn't have any really consistency to it. And like I mentioned before, you gotta clamp this thing down. You saw in the video how I kind of shook it just to make sure it was clamped down. Those little toggle clamps, my dad was a huge fan of those, so it was kind of a tribute to him, but they're pretty cool. But I'm super happy with the way this came out. I think it's a great tribute to my dad. Again, it doesn't have to be just flat surfaces in order to get a good carving on there. So if you have questions, let me know. Eric@makeawoodssign.com. Thanks so much for watching. We love you guys. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.